in Revelation 16:16. It says, "And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon." In this day with God, page 308, it says, "The principalities and powers of earth are in bitter revolt against the God of heaven. They are filled with hatred against all who serve him. And soon, very soon, it is to be fought, the last great battle between good and evil. The earth is to be the battlefield, the scene of the final contest and the final victory. Here, for so long, Satan has led men against God. Rebellion is to be forever suppressed." In other words, it ends in our generation if, in fact, he comes in our generation. I'm not setting dates. No one knows the day or the hour when Jesus is coming back. We understand the prophecies. We know what's going to happen next. We just don't know when. Dated prophecy ended when the end times began, at the end of that 2,300-year prophecy of Daniel. This we know as students of prophecy. So, and those of us that study prophecy are quite aware that in the very end, all the deceived people of the world will gather together to seek out prophecy, understanding, commandment-keeping Christians. Because of what I was mentioning earlier about Revelation 12:17, where it says, "The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Right? And we understand the testimony of Jesus Christ. Revelation 19:10, the angel actually tells John the testimony of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. See, that's one of the reasons the dragon is so angry with us. We could tell you today what the Pope is going to do tomorrow. That gets their blood up. They don't like the idea that people know in advance what they're planning. And that's why Christians have become second-class citizens and third-class citizens in many nations, even though we're the most gentle people known on earth. Now, I'm not talking about the fake Christians that claim to be Christians and yet will blow somebody's brains out. I'm talking about true, faithful Christians that trust the Lord entirely. These Christians have historically been known never to lift a finger against their fellow man. It's very plain in the Scriptures, "Do violence to no man." But yet we're the most feared. Why? Well, it's obvious. They fear our God. Since we allow the Bible to define its own symbols and prophecy, as 2 Peter 1:20 instructs us, we know that Revelation 12:9 says the dragon is Satan, and Jeremiah 6:2 says the woman is the church. We know that Satan is making war against Christ's bride, the church, to kill them, as did the non-believers seek to kill the Jews in the book of Esther thousands of years ago. Esther 3:13 says, "And the letters were sent by the post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey." So it's always about money, and that's how they're going to do it in our day, too. I mean, back then, civilization was all but civil by today's standards, in that people of the day saw no sin in killing the Jews for financial gain. So how does the end-time prophecy, wherein the people of the world come against the remnant, come to fruition in our world? I mean, how does that how is that going to happen? How are people actually going to think it's perfectly acceptable to kill other people? Well, if you look closely, you'll find it's actually going to be a lot easier for Satan to employ the minds of the wicked to do such an act. As history proves, people are generally easy to coach into violent acts. Look at what we've witnessed over the last few decades in the area of mind manipulation on the masses regarding rock and roll, for example, or even rap or jazz or whatever, any kind of music, because we all know about music and who's the angel of it, all right? So I'll get into that a little later, but these bands, these rock bands, for example, make literally millions of dollars each on an annual basis, selling everything from sex, drugs, murder, rape, civil unrest, and even outright Satanism to the kids. I know there's one band years ago, actually, they had to think about it on the news because it was a rapper. In the music, he was saying, "Go out and kill the cops, kill the police." And this is sold and bought. And the graphics on these CDs and the disgusting MTV videos filled with what looks to be blood-curdling visions from hell says plenty about their desires to twist the minds of our youth. Of course, it's all hidden under the guise that it's cool to be bad, and the kids eat it up thanks to their peer pressure to be like the cool kids. A mere 50 years ago, television shows like MTV would be considered absolutely illegal. And Satan knows this. So Elvis, the pretty boy king of rock and roll, gyrates on stage. It became easy to start the ball rolling downhill because, like Eve allowing the serpent to entertain her in the garden, all the girls ran to Elvis and what he represented. And as for the guys that followed after Elvis, as many will admit, they did it to keep their girlfriends near their side, and some actually did it because they wanted to be cool like Elvis. Still, his music was tamed by today's standards. Nevertheless, he was the talk of the town. Satan even used negative advertising to push Elvis further and further and further into the limelight, like the Ed Sullivan Show, for example. Ed Sullivan refused to film Elvis from the waist down because of the vulgar ways that he moved his body. That act alone skyrocketed Elvis to stardom, and more teenagers bought his records and flocked to his concerts to see what their parents didn't want them to see. Now think about this. Had a guy like Alice Cooper, who likes to sing about dead babies in the 70s, or Marilyn Manson, just looking at that guy's face is enough to what's up with him. But I don't do any of this music stuff. But Marilyn Manson, if these guys, if Alice Cooper or Marilyn Manson would have stepped on stage in the 1950s when Elvis was there, people literally would have committed those guys to insane asylums. Literally, they would have gone in and they would have just been considered insane. So instead, Satan used Elvis, a gentle, loving man who claimed to be a wholesome Christian, who loved his mother and his country. His gentle, cute-faced, boyish charm started what we call rock music today. Yes, back when Elvis was gyrating on stage, some Christian preachers did speak out to warn that this music would eventually influence the kids to such an extent they would become very evil if left unchecked throughout the years. But the usual blind scoffers laughed and laughed and laughed, and eventually the decadence was allowed freely. Common sense was the reason given to say it was impossible for something as trivial as music to become such a threat. I mean, come on, it's just music, guys, give it up. So the Christians were ignored. Rock and roll was born and given life for all to enjoy, as it was considered safe as any other music of the day. And just a few decades later, we now see bands like Marilyn Manson, or Twisted Sister, or KISS, Kids in Satanic Service, or AC/DC, a community defeating Christ. Okay, I'm not making this stuff up. This is what these guys said in Hit Parader, what their initials stood for, because I used to read Hit Parader when I was a teenager. And Ozzy Osbourne, he's considered almost Satan himself to many, many of his fans. These guys proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that those preachers back in the 50s were 100% correct. The children would be manipulated by this music, and they would eventually become worse and worse and worse, and become acceptable. Today, all sorts of evil, decadence, is becoming acceptable because most parents see no wrong in their kids listening to such hellish music that's filled with all sorts of satanic suggestions. As Christians, we need to guard our souls, and especially our children's souls, from such dangerous things as this. Some may not be aware, but when I first started street preaching, I not only exposed Rome, I also had a burden to expose the music that seems to be so popular among the youth today. Most don't realize that this music is purposely created with backwards masking. Check it out on YouTube when you get a chance. Right? It's created with backward masking so as to effectively pipe its decadent suggestions right into the subconscious mind of the children in the same way like self-help tapes. And I remember reading about this in the 1970s when they first came out with the self-help tapes, and they came out with backward masking, or they discovered it, if you will. You know, like when you look at your image, your face inside of a spoon, and you see your head is upside down in the spoon because the spoon is concave, so it inverts the image? Your eyeball works the same way. You're looking at the computer screen right now, let's say. The computer screen is upside down on the back of your eyeball. Your brain flips it, right? Well, the ear works the same way. The ear, if it hears something that doesn't make sense, it'll flip it. And then if it makes sense, it stores it in the subconscious. And to prove this, these scientists did this thing in a closed, like a sleep study, where they had this woman go to sleep, and while she was sleeping, she would listen to a self-help tape where a man would repeat something to her. It was like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And he would repeat it to her over and over again on this tape. But he would speak it in reverse, and she couldn't hear him either. subconsciously because it was hidden by waves beating on the shore or some kind of music or something. It was masked, all right? And so when they woke her up, they did something else that was satanic. They hypnotized her. And then she spoke what the man said on the tape verbatim, but she said it forward. They found they had an amazing tool. So since parents recall their glory days when they used to enjoy rock music, they had been deceived to think that nothing bad came of it from, for them. At least they don't think, but that's what they believe. So with that in mind, they believe that their kids are going to be just as safe with today's music. They figure the kids will grow up and grow out of it and ignore the music's evil suggestions just as they think they did. Self-deception is one of Satan's most favorite attacks on the souls of billions. That's why you have such an evil society today. Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to me. Some still believe it's no big threat, even though the prophet Ezekiel clearly stated long ago that Satan was created with musical instruments inside of his body before he fell and became Satan. He used to be called Lucifer. He used to sing for the Heavenly Father. It says in Ezekiel 28:13, it says, and speaking about Satan, Ezekiel says, "Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering." Satan was the most beautiful creation. He was the first angel ever created. So every precious stone was thy covering. The sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold, the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes. That's two musical instruments right there. Was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Strangely, and if you want, I can read you the lyrics to I Am Music and I Write the Songs that Barry Manilow sang in the 70s. I'll do this after church because I don't want to do it right now, but it's unbelievable, the words to this song. You got to hear the words to this song, and most people miss it because it's behind a melody. It's so loving and gentle, and it's Barry Manilow singing with that beautiful voice. You got to hear these lyrics. You wouldn't believe something in a pop song that he's saying this stuff, all right? But nobody listened to the lyrics for some reason. So going on, as I was saying, many ignore the power of music on the human mind for some reason. I don't understand that. But one easy way to alert some of this danger is to ask them what happens when they hear a song on the radio that they haven't heard for 20 years. I like this because this happens to me because I used to get into music when I was a teenager, right? You're driving down the road and you're flipping through the channels, and this happens to me a lot when I listen to talk radio because talk radio has a tendency to start the radio programs with some music from the 70s. They just like to do that, And all of a sudden, you know it. You know the song word for word. You could actually sing along if you wanted to, right? Word for word, not a problem. But 20 years ago, let's do this. How about this? Stop the song and word for word. You proved by the shadow of a doubt. It all came to your remembrance. Now, stop the music, pull over, and now recite to me word for word something you memorized in your classes, in your history class, for example, in high school. Can you do it? No. Nobody can do it. Something you memorized 20 years ago, you can't do it. But once you put it to music, you can. This is why music is so important today. You go into the store, you go into an elevator, you go into a train, there's music everywhere. Satan doesn't want you to be alone with your thoughts. Why? Because that's what our Heavenly Father speaks to you. Oh, and by the way, is this why the Vatican has been posting rap music on their MySpace page? That's extremely evil, as well as holding concerts where rock bands perform for the kids. So thanks to most people not reading their Bibles, as the prophet Amos predicted for our day, they are unaware that one of the very last prophecies is an increase in the spiritual realm or the occult. 1 Timothy 4:1 says, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils." This is why Harry Potter is so popular. It's fashioning children's minds so that within 10, 15 years we'll have a society of adults that believe that falderall that Simon Magus did in his day, 2,000 years ago. And this is why you got guys like Chris Angel and all these other pagan magicians doing these things. And then Revelation 16:14 says, "For they are the spirits of devils working miracles." Harry Potter has lit that hellish fire of fulfillment like none other in modern times. And thanks to the non-stop sludge of vulgar innuendos and jokes on TV that are off-color, sexual, violent, perverted, and outright blasphemous in sitcoms like The Simpsons, people the world over have adopted the exact same mindset of those people that were alive in Noah's day, just as Jesus predicted they would for our day. Right before the flood, God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That's from Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. And then Jesus says in Matthew 24, verse 37, but as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. In other words, it's going to be that way too for our life. So thanks to all the decadence pumped into the minds of unprotected souls, soon we will have a generation of people so morally bankrupt that the thought of killing a Christian would not be considered any worse than it was in the Roman Colosseums 2,000 years ago. In fact, just last week, I found out that in the Muslim world alone, 165,000 Christians were killed for their faith in just the last 11 months of 2009. I just found this out last week. If they keep their average, which I don't doubt they will, of 15,000 people killed a month, we will see 180,000 Christians killed for their faith in the year 2009 alone. Yet, Islam is protected the world over in their hellish assault against Christ and his people, simply because their officially documented creator in Rome, they created this because they need to continue their slaughter in the same way they needed Roman Catholic Adolf Hitler to do as he did in his day. And by the way, it was also reported that as of 2009, a Christian is tortured for their faith I couldn't believe this, but it's true because it was documented, every 3 minutes in the Muslim world. That's 20 Christians tortured every hour, 480 every day, 3,360 every week, 14,400 every month, and 172,800 Christians are tortured each and every year. And again, this isn't including China, India, or North Korea, or even right here in the States where it's done behind closed doors. We all know about China killing Christians in India and North Korea. They hate them and they kill them all the time. But the Muslims are very, very vocal about it. Still, even with all this torture and killing going on, the grand majority of the people still aren't conditioned enough to see that killing Christians should be acceptable. So, more hellish-inspired entertainment has to be invented that will draw them into the conditioning of their minds so that they can do the task. In my October 2004 newsletter, 6 years ago, this coming October, I reported on how France built a scaled-down version of the ancient Roman Colosseum solely for the entertainment of the masses. They had chariot races, mock gladiator fights, and right there in the middle of it all, they had a beautiful woman representing a Christian martyr who was chained to a post with a lion sitting right next to her for historic realism. To think, mankind has stooped so low into sin that a horrific historic fact as Christians being eaten alive is right now suggested to the masses as an acceptable form of entertainment is enough to make one realize that yes, they are in fact conditioning the minds of millions so as to get to the point that killing their fellow man will one day become acceptable. Now do you see how the fulfillment of Jesus' prophetic statement in Matthew 24 can be seen as fulfilled in today's world? Where he said in verse 12, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Our love for our fellow man must be degraded if this is going to work for Satan. As Christian theology declares, by beholding we become changed. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if they be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. You know, a lot of our young people, if they would just have that Bible verse in mind while they turn on their radio to listen to rap or rock or whatever, they would turn it right off because they know there's nothing pure about what they're about to listen to or holy or good report or virtuous or anything. If Christians do as the Holy Spirit suggests here, we will become changed into the likeness of Christ, because it says, by beholding we shall become changed. We understand this. So we can now see that the same is true for satanic theology as well. If we look upon those things that are a lie, or dishonest, or unjust, or impure, or hateful, or a bad report, or without virtue, and hold no praise to God, we will become changed to emulate Satan. That's just common sense. I mean, you don't even have to be a believer to see this happening. You don't even have to believe in the scriptures to see that this has happened in today's society. All this merrymaking and all this entertainment, along with strange religions all around the world, are designed purposely to change the minds of billions for Satan to have an easy day of it when Armageddon is finally come upon us. As for the scoffer that still thinks the prophesied Armageddon is a myth, I have to ask, why all the evil acceleration in the world over in our day? Why is this happening now? You can no longer find a tame society in any nation. Is this all just one big, whopping, grand coincidence? I mean, seriously. Let's take a look at the public schools for another example. It is here that they literally indoctrinate the children as young as 4 years old into godless drones. On my main page of the website, under the section Homeschool Spurs, I have many articles of the insane things that teachers are doing. And they're getting paid for this by the government. Literally, the government's asking them to do these things. The kids are being taught at a very early age that homosexuality is perfectly acceptable as a normal way of life. Evolution is scientifically sound, and they back this up because John Paul II and Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, all stated that evolution is true, right? In other words, the Bible's a myth now, and these guys are supposed to be Christian leaders. And they also teaching the kids that Islam is a peaceful religion, and they state that Christianity is a myth. The kids are being raped, murdered, assaulted, and even drugged each and every day right there in their schools. And I'm very sad to report, if you look at the articles, that's just what the teachers are doing to them. The students are doing it as well, yeah, but it's grown into an epidemic now thanks to the minds of many drifting towards Satan's plans for Armageddon. And to top it off, all of this is added to what we parents witnessed as the norm in the schools in our day. Because I remember when my wife and I were going to school, I mean, drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and gang violence was just part of the curriculum. I mean, the teachers will say, oh, we don't teach that. I says, well, come on. You go to the school. You don't have to teach. You don't only learn in a classroom. You learn in the hallways of the school, too, and out there in the playgrounds or whatever. The curriculum is all part of the whole ball of wax. So anyone that has read the Bible and understands basic child rearing procedures know that we must train up a child in the way he should go, that when he is old, he will not depart from it, according to Proverbs 22:6. Satan knows this. And so this is why he focuses on the kids. If he gets them young enough, he'll have adults doing as he wants. This way, with each generation, he can cultivate a more evil crop of adults who will become leaders in his agenda against God's people. Now, as prophesied, Satan is surely manipulating the people in the schools, the TV, the magazines, novels, newspapers, video games, music, peer pressure, and of course his old favorites, sex, lying, alcohol, drugs, anger, and a host of other things. Almost everything we consider to be entertainment today is purposely geared towards that end. Case in point, look at the bare-knuckle cage matches wherein many young men beat themselves silly and sometimes even to death, and all for the entertainment of others casting bets on their outcome. And the more you pay, the closer you can get to the blood to sit next to the cage. I mean, it's big-ticket items if you can sit close enough to where when the guy gets punched, his blood will splash on your clothing. Big ticket. Do you think that started out as normal? Or has it also come about in the same way that satanic music bands arrived? The comparatively tame sport of boxing of not too many years ago seems rather disciplined compared to this, but thanks to that getting more and more violent over the years and then escalating into what they believe are more entertaining TV by the fakery of professional wrestling, which, by the way, used hidden razor blades to spill blood at the right time when the cameras were zooming in so as to get the ratings up. Do you think this would eventually lead to blood sports, as they are now called, becoming the norm? Certainly you can see that the pattern here as well. Now, look at the video games. When they first came out, And I remember this because the games came out when I was a young man. It was merely about friendly competition, which isn't good to begin with either, because you've always got a loser who's going to be downtrodden, and you got the winner who's exalting himself. But still, it was about just friendly competition that sold the games to families. Pong, for example, I don't know if anybody remembers Pong, P-O-N-G. It was a game where you simply tried to prevent a white dot from traveling into your goal from your opponent's paddle. When we first turned it on our TV, we thought, how did they do that? This TV used to show pictures of people. Now it's a perfectly square white dot, and there's these goals on either side of the screen, and then you get this other white dot that's a little longer, and you got a joystick, and you can move that dot up and down. And it's like boink, 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 and it would go across the screen. That was it. That's how the game started. Now we have games with realistic graphics that they literally depict satanic acts of animal and human sacrifice, demon worship, rape, mayhem, theft, occultism, conjuring dead spirits like the Witch of Endor did, in King Saul's day, and even murder. And to think this is all for just a few points in the game. Do you think some brainwashing's going on here? Do you think they're getting the people ready to do something? I mean, it's happening everywhere in society. Worse yet, thanks to the internet coming to our neighborhoods now, you can play these extremely violent and satanic games online with real, breathing people on the other end that lend a real human life to the equation. So now, when you kill that character in the game, you actually get to kill somebody on the other end. Well, they don't literally die, but you actually get to kill them. And the bloodier the death, the more points you get. Is it possible this will cause the minds of many to escalate into a generation of killers, just as rock music treated Satanists? Or am I making no sense whatsoever like those anti-rock and roll preachers did back in the 50s? I mean, need I remind you, one of the favored pastimes of those teenagers that shot up their schools in recent years used to be all these video games and rock music? Still, even though we now have actual evidence that these video games create angry teens and adults, they are still legal to be created and sold. And yes, it's true, they place a big, huge black M for mature on the video game package, so mommy and daddy will know it's not safe for their kids. But thanks to the economic toys that they're playing with in Washington, mommy and daddy have to have a job now. So the kids are what they called back in the 70s latchkey kids, where they're freewheeling in life. This has been going on for 40 years now, where the kids, they come home, they babysit themselves. So how easy is it going to be for those kids to get their hands on those video games? If they don't shoplift them or get some other adult to buy them for them that's over 18, because that's the legal age now, how many 15 and 16-year-olds do you know, or 12-year-olds do you know that knows somebody that's 18 that'll buy them those games? And irregardless of that, most of the games can be downloaded. And how easy is it for the kids to download them? All the kids got to do is click a button that says, yep, I'm 18. They got the game. Yeah, it's just like the porno sites, too, from what I hear. All you got to do is click a button, and boom, you're in. If you research, and just quickly on Hollywood, researching the statistics on this, you will find that as TV shows and Hollywood movies became more and more violent over the years with their rapes, assaults, and murders, and I forget where I saw this, but somewhere I read, and this was back in the early 90s or late 80s where I read this, where they said by the time a teenager reaches the age of 13, they will have witnessed, 15 or 20,000 murders on TV. 15 or 20,000 murders on TV. So, anyway, with all this stuff that's going on in Hollywood, all these rapes and assaults and murders, the amazing thing here is, as those murders or those videos and those TV shows and those movies got more and more violent, society became more and more violent right along with those very same statistics. Add to the mix the violent music lyrics, the violent video games, the violent blood sports in those coliseums in France. Is it any wonder we have skyrocketing rapes, assaults, and serial killers today? But again, I could just be overreacting like those preachers did in the 1950s. One last thing I would like to mention that most people miss. I believe what I'm about to share is the ultimate in conditioning people into thinking murder is acceptable. Abortion. Yes, the law says it's legal, but the law also said in Esther's day it was legal to kill the Jews. Did that make it right? Of course not. The Bible says life starts at conception. In fact, the Lord even knows our names in the womb. Isaiah 49 verse 1 says, the Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. Will some finally begin to see how easy it is to make people think murder is okay? They are killing millions of babies every year, and all of them think it's 100% acceptable. In fact, it's now considered a form of birth control to kill a baby. Not only do they have what's called the abortion pill, okay, we all know about that, because that's ridiculous in itself. I mean, instead of taking other types of birth control, these girls are taking abortion pills that literally don't work unless a baby's conceived, and then the baby's killed by the pill. But worse yet, I just found out about this the other day in the United Kingdom. It was just discovered that most sexually active young girls have upwards of 4 abortions by the time they're 18. Murder has become universally acceptable around the world. Sure, it's only babies who are considered nothing but useless cells to most, but we are Christians. And as Christians, are we not aware of what's going on here? And are we also not aware that we are becoming second-class citizens? And in some nations, third-class citizens? In the eyes of some, we're a bunch of useless people, just like fetuses are a bunch of useless cells. If Satan has already been able to get the Muslims, the Hindus, the Koreans, and the Chinese to kill Christians, how big of a leap do you suppose it'll be for Satan to get the rest to fall in line? Especially since he's already been able to convince them to kill their very own babies. Seriously, if a prophet told you 200 years ago mothers would kill their babies for reasons ranging from wanting to keep their girlish figure to doing so would be able to keep their boyfriends, you'd laugh at them. It's just impossible. They would laugh. They say, no, there's no way that women would literally kill their babies as a norm in society because they want to keep their boyfriends nearby, or they want to keep their girlish figure, or we just don't have the money right now for a baby, or I just don't like kids. Kill it off. Well, they're doing this in our society right now. Will some still laugh when we tell them Christians will be killed as easy as babies are being killed right now? As prophesied, the calamities will increase around the world in number, and just as that minister stated in December of 2004, commandment-keeping Christians will be blamed for the disasters because we refuse to keep Sunday laws as a way to stop them. Now, if you remember, it was like that Presbyterian minister, that Christmas tsunami that killed 300,000 people. He stated in that newspaper article that I put on the Sabbath Attack page, and that article that I did in the newsletter and on the radio, he stated the reason that tsunami came on Sundays because people weren't going to church on Sundays. That was predicted over 100 years ago, that's what they would do. They would say, because we refuse to keep the Sabbath of Sunday, there's going to be all these disasters. And so we're being blamed for this. What he isn't telling you is the people that died, a lot of them that died in that tsunami were in their Sunday-keeping church when they died. Oh, they don't bring that up. They just tell people that it happened on Sunday. They're testing the waters is what they're doing. That's what they did to Jesus. They said Jesus must die so that the whole nation doesn't perish. Well, that prophecy states that that's what they're going to use on us. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's going to be billions of people suddenly snapping mentally to become drooling zombie killers, out of the blue one day, and who will seek out the commandment-keeping Christians to kill them as their church and their government demands is the best thing to do to save the planet? No, of course not. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen that way. It has to be done gradually, or the people will catch on to what Satan's up to via the headquarters in Rome, and they're going to revolt. So how will this day come that prophecy says is absolutely inevitable? As intimated here, Satan needs to indoctrinate or brainwash the people into such a mindset that doing as the Vatican and the leaders in the state ask them to do will be easily acceptable. Hitler did it in a comparatively short period of time in his day, but Hitler was able to get a bunch of kids in his day to actually turn their own parents in to be killed. Nero did the same thing 2,000 years ago. And the people in Esther's day saw it as the norm when the king made a decree in their day. If boxing can escalate to blood sports, and rock and roll can merge into devil worship, and then violent video games and TV shows and movies can help create Christian killers just as much as anything else. And by beholding, they will become Christian killers. They are already killing their own babies. The next logical step is obvious. I won't even get into the doctor-assisted suicide laws passing left and right. Just this last Thursday, 2 days ago, it was made law in Montana, USA, that doctors can help you kill yourself. Death has become very much the norm in today's society. Armageddon is truly banging on the door. In Testimonies, Volume 1, page 287, it says, "The world is ripening for its destruction. God can bear with sinners but a little longer. They must drink the dregs of the cup of his wrath, unmixed with mercy. Those who will be heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ to the immortal inheritance will be peculiar." In other words, many of us are already peculiar. Praise the Lord. We know this. We don't seek entertainment by violent, perverted, or blasphemous video games, music, TV shows, or movies, or the blood sports, or any other strange things. We don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't use foul language, we don't blaspheme or embrace any strange behavior or pagan ritual that we see people of the world doing. And so we truly are a peculiar bunch, and that in itself says a lot. But anyway, Sister White continues by declaring that, yes, the remnant people, they're so peculiar that God places a mark upon them as his, holy his. Think ye that God will receive, honor, and acknowledge a people so mixed up with the world that they differ from them only in name? Isn't that what the Seventh-day Adventists are doing? They say, oh, you got to keep the name Seventh-day Adventist. You can't be saved by a name. Even Sister White said that. And she says here to read Titus chapter 2, verses 13 to 15, but I want to back it up one verse and read from 12 to 15. It says, "Teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. These things speak and exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no man despise thee." And then she continues by saying, "It is soon to be known who is on the Lord's side and who will not be ashamed of Jesus. Those who have not moral courage to conscientiously take their position in the face of unbelievers, leave the fashions of the world, and imitate the self-denying life of Christ are ashamed of him and do not love his example." So as people continue to deny God as their creator and abide by his law, more and more of the people will become extremely evil, as in Noah's day. In fact, even their children will start to show signs of intense evil at a very young age. Lately, I've been seeing articles about children killing and raping children. A 14-year-old boy, for example, raped a 12-year-old girl under a school stairwell during school hours, and a 10-year-old boy raped an 8-year-old girl. But nothing confirms the decadence has spread further, as Jesus prophesied for our day, than an article I saw on December 23rd that stated a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 7-year-old boy were all up on charges for raping a 3-year-old toddler. I wonder, did they play their big brother's video game that day? Can you see the big picture here? The Bible clearly states in many prophetic scriptures that Rome hates real Christians. They hate them just as much, if not more, than they did during the Inquisition when they killed 500 million of them. They are going to use their prophesied power over the people to get everyone to help them rid the planet of these Christians. Prophecy is really, really blunt here. They tried this 2,000 years ago. They tried this with Hitler. They are trying it now with the Muslims. And soon they're going to get every soul on earth that has not accepted Jesus Christ as Lord to convince that you, me, and every soul in the remnant church is the reason for the widespread calamities on earth. They've already started that as well. In closing, said Jesus, now this is from Testimonies, Volume 4, page 251. She says, said Jesus, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. If we are true servants of God, there should be no question in our minds as to whether we will obey his commandments or consult our own temporal interests. If the believers in the truth are not sustained by their faith in these comparatively peaceful days," in other words, it's legal to be a Christian now, "what will uphold them when the grand test comes and the decree goes forth against all those who will not worship the image of the beast and receive the mark in their foreheads or in their hands. This solemn period is not far off. Indeed, of becoming weak and irresolute, the people of God should be gathering strength and courage for the time of trouble. The virgins need to wake up. The loud cry needs to start. They're already passing Sunday laws everywhere. Every day on my website this last week and a half, I found a new article about them doing just that. So I hope and pray that you are blessed with a desire to go forth and share our faith with as many as you possibly can.